Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind a beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. We are recording this just a few hours prior to the biggest game in world football, so you may notice an air of respectful politeness going on throughout the show. And I'll start by saying, Mr. Maguire, how are you? Where are you? Are you well?
I'm in sunny Sussex. I'm full of trepidation, like I suspect we both are. It's not about winning; it's about not losing. As far as this match is concerned,
I'll take that now. If you want to shake hands on not losing now, if we could let both managers know, that would be fine. I don't understand. I was in a conversation with a Brighton fan yesterday, and he said they've been researching the last time they scored an own goal. Because if that's the only way we're going to score, but I understand you're having a nice civilised meeting with one of the fans of our pods today, aren't you? Before the game.
Yes, I am. Yeah, and that's how it should be. Before and after, we can get on like a house on fire, and then for 90 minutes, we sort of descend into the Warriors, that fantastic film from the 70s.
Yeah, indeed. And the good news is, I won't name him, but everybody will know who he is. The Palace fan that you're meeting is also a big fan of the beetroot and egg white cocktail.
He's a proper lovey.
Yeah, luckily, Kieran, we won't have time to talk about the biggest game in the world happening tonight. So we have got, I don't know what's in the water at the moment. There seems to be more news than, the old cliche, there's always just enough news to fill a newspaper. But we seem to have more news than we normally have. And the first bit, before I forget, news is that we have another interview coming up for you all tomorrow, as it will be when you listen to this. We spoke to Mark Ives, General Manager of the National League. A very interesting interview it was. Mark was very open about the fuss about the distribution of the National Lottery money. He's very open about 2 up, 2 down, whether or not it's coming, about the Hollywood effect. So if you have any interest in football or indeed the National League, I suggest you listen to that when it's out tomorrow. In the meantime, Kieran, in real news, as no one's ever said on ITV News at 10, 2 clubs at opposite ends of the Championship are united with a common misfortune.
Yes, the EFL has the guys there definitely put the underpants on over their trousers and are handing out naughty step activities left, right, and centre. So we've now got 4 clubs in the EFL Championship, which are subject to embargoes. And the 2 latest additions are Huddersfield Town and Burnley. And the reason for this, and the EFL handbook, which is very thorough, I'll say no more than that, does specifically state that you have to have handed in your accounts to the EFL, even if you've not published them on the club website, even if you've not published them at Companies House, you have to submit them to the EFL by a deadline of the 1st of March. Failure to do so can invoke sanctions, and it would appear that both Burnley and Huddersfield Town have failed to do so. Now, as always, you have to sort of say, well, there's 2 sides to every story. Burnley say that they changed their auditors in November, and therefore they've not had a chance to get the accounts out. I have an element of sympathy with that, because if you do change the auditors themselves, they've got a timetable for the work which they're due to undertake. So it could be that it's just simply taken too long to get the account sorted. But they do need to get their act together. And also, Burnley are under a little bit of additional scrutiny because of the leveraged buyout way in which the club was acquired by Alan Pace and his colleagues. My personal view is that Burnley are in a very strong position financially. I've said on many occasions that during the period of the previous ownership, they were probably one of the best run clubs, if not the best run club financially in the Premier League. They have sold a load of players since being relegated. and that's generated extra cash. My understanding is that there are relegation clauses in contracts as well, which will further protect the club. So I don't see it as being a financial issue, and therefore it all the more strange that the club has not got round to publishing the accounts. So I think it's just an administrative issue. In relation to Huddersfield Town, I think things are slightly more complicated. There was a takeover a few years ago when Dean Hoyle, who'd originally taken the club up to the Premier League, his health was a prime concern for him, so he sold the club. The new owner, things didn't work out too well. Dean Hoyle has come back. I think there's a lot of fog at Huddersfield, and this probably isn't helping. But as far as the transfer embargo itself is concerned, to a certain extent, it's a token punishment, given that the transfer window doesn't open for a few more months. I'm pretty confident that Burnley will not have to worry about the opening of the window. I suspect Burnley's issue will be cleared up very quickly. I'm slightly less confident with regards to Huddersfield, because there does seem to be some confrontation. There seems to be some confusion in relation to the ownership in terms of decision making, and it's something which needs to be resolved sooner rather than later. And as you rightly say, Huddersfield are not having a good season as far as their on-field performance is concerned, and with the end of parachute payments and a potential drop into League One, that would be quite a significant financial jolt for the club to have to deal with.
Just a couple of things there, Kieran, off the back of that. So Burnley basically being punished for late filing of accounts, the sort of thing that happens in the Premier League by most clubs. And also you're saying, I mean, you mentioned the EFL putting their Superman pants on. It does seem, anecdotally, that the EFL are being tougher than they have been in previous months and years. Is that right, or is that a false perception?
No, I think since Trevor Birch arrived, and we've had Trevor Birch on the show. We've met Trevor. He is from a background of running a football club. He was the chief exec at Chelsea when Roman Abramovich arrived, by all accounts. He also is an insolvency practitioner, again, historically. So therefore, he knows the importance of cash. He knows the importance of being able to monitor financial activity without having to look too far in the rearview mirror. The longer it takes a club to submit information, the less valuable is the information there. So the EFL have also recruited staff. I was on a panel with our friend Nick DeMarco and somebody from the EFL's sort of financial review panel last week. This was at a law event, and it's very clear that they take their responsibilities seriously, and they are holding clubs to account. And I think that's to be welcomed from the point of view of us as fans, because we don't want another Bury, we don't want another Macclesfield, and the ability to hold clubs to account, to ensure that they know that they are being watched if they fail to comply with the rules, I think sends out the right type of signal.
And why then are the Premier League much more sanguine about late filing of accounts than the EFL clearly are?
Well, I think the Premier League do have their own set of rules. And remember, we talk about late filing of accounts. There's submitting accounts to the EFL and the Premier League, and then there's submitting the accounts to Companies House. Now, the two things are separated. One is determined by company law, and that's the Companies House issues, and the other is determined by the individual constitutions of the entity. So, as far as I'm aware, clubs have submitted the details in the Premier League, and I think we've still got that same deadline, except the Premier League has not had to go to the extent of expressing disappointment with those clubs who've failed to submit, because I think they have all been sent in. What is, I think, annoying for fans. We eat and breathe all aspects of our football clubs, and a lot of me says, actually, as a football fan, I shouldn't really have to give a damn about the submission of the club accounts. It has become, and we're sort of we're at the sort of the centre of this storm to a certain extent ourselves. You think about, we never expected this podcast to have any form of success, and we're still slightly bewildered by it. But the revealing of a set of club accounts, it's now become a bit like when a club announces a kit. Everybody has an opinion on them, just like when the kit is launched, grown men go into full Trini and Susanna mode for 24 hours. Equally, they become financial experts for 24 hours, and then just like all aspects of things, we move on to something else. But I think it is frustrating for those fans of those clubs who take the approach of either giving out snippets of information or delaying right until the very last minute until they actually do publish. Just get it out, and actually, what you will find is your competitors gain no advantage whatsoever. I'll be perfectly frank when they do see the accounts coming out, because again, you're looking at something relating to a year ago, and it just shuts people up, especially me. And I think that's quite a good thing.
I like the idea of a club issuing their first accounts and then their brand new second accounts and the third accounts as well. A process I believe Uncle Terry used to be very fond of. Those noises you can hear in the background, by the way, are my son trying to be quiet. God bless him. Or why he thinks microwaving his coffee would be quieter than boiling the kettle, I don't know. Interesting though, Kieran. I would point people towards our interview with Mark Ives tomorrow, because he's very interesting about the way that the National League monitor their clubs on a monthly basis, which I won't give away now. We'll talk about that afterwards, but that's certainly something I didn't know, and that's something we'll talk about in more detail tomorrow. Now, we've ascertained on this pod, Kieran, over the years that EasyJet and or Ryanair have probably made a lot of money on flights between Watford and Udine over the years, because Watford and Udinese have a well-travelled path between them. There's been a slight, shall we say, a bit of turbulence on one of the flights between those two towns.
Yes, this was a story we did speak about last August. It is the story of Hassan Kamara. In January 2022, when Watford were in the Premier League, he was acquired for £3.6 million. He made a positive impression. I think he became player of the season, although there wasn't a lot of competition by all accounts, given that even one of the Watford players themselves accused some other members of the squad of effectively downing tools. So Watford were relegated to the Championship. And then in August 2022, they sold Hassan Kamara, who'd only been there for about 25 games. They sold him to Udinese for £16.9 million. Now, Udinese, for those people are not familiar with the case, Udinese is owned by the Pozzo family, and Watford are owned by the Pozzo family, but different members. I think it's a sort of a father and son relationship. And then Hassan Kamara was immediately loaned back to Watford. Now, we don't know the extent of the loan fee, but the EFL, by all accounts, is now, again, investigating this particular deal in respect of, is it at fair value? Because it does seem a significant increase. It's difficult to see the benefit in Watford selling the player and then loaning them back. Now, if we actually take a look at Udinese themselves, they sold their left back, Destiny Udogie, to Spurs at around about the same time, and then Spurs loaned Destiny Udogie straight back to Udinese. So this type of thing does take place on a regular basis. So we have to have a broader analysis. And I would imagine that Destiny Udogie is going to be potentially the first choice left back. And therefore, you've got to wonder what was the logic behind Watford selling the player. And it could be argued that effectively what Udinese are doing is they're getting the benefit of the player they've sold to Spurs, and they want to ensure that Hassan Kamara is getting regular first-team football. We've now seen, however, I think it's around about 60 transfers between Watford and Udinese since the Pozzo family bought Watford. I think it was in 2012. From our very good friend Lawrence Bassini, who has promised to come on the show one day. I think he said he was soon as he's finished the acquisition of Birmingham City, he is coming on.
Sorry, Kieran, I was just distracted by that large pig flying over my back garden.
Yes, but yeah, we'll hold him to it. So this does bring into focus the multi-club ownership issues, which are increasingly being part of modern day football. And look, I support Brighton. Our owner Tony Bloom, he also owns Union Saint-Gilloise in Belgium. There are transfers between those two clubs. We've recruited players and then put them out on loan. And the idea there is either for them to earn GBE points, governing body endorsement points, or the feeling is that players not quite ready for first team in the Premier League, and that they want to be able to monitor the player that much more closely before bringing him back to the mothership. So this story in isolation is not a huge issue. I think the fact that the EFL are looking at the value of the player, and I think here we have a genuine. That's not to say it's a problem, but it's what is the value of a football player? It's one man's Banksy is another man's what's that crap on that wall over there, and trying to find a definitive value in respect of a football player. And Watford said, well, with Udinese had the player independently valued in Italy because they didn't want to fall into the trap that we've seen with Juventus and some other clubs who have ended up with, in the case of Juventus, a points deduction in respect of a number of issues to do with player sales and effectively a glorified ring of roses when it comes to moving players around between clubs.
All roads tend to come back to FFP on this pod, Kieran, so I presume that's why the EFL are investigating a price that may have been superficially inflated.
Yes. When I look at Watford's accounts, I don't see anything major that should trouble the scorers as far as FFP is concerned. But at the same time, it could be it could help a cash flow issue. Watford have taken out an awful lot of loans. Udinese could have therefore transferred cash across to Watford, which would have allowed them to compete more in the summer 22 market. But I don't personally see a huge issue with regards to Watford and FFP compliance. But as always, the devil's in the detail.
Yeah, I think I keep meaning to say artificially inflated. I don't know why I keep saying superficially inflated, except I work in showbiz, so the word superficial comes to mind more easily than the word artificial. We're only 2 stories in, Kieran, and we're 18 minutes down. I know, Kieran, these have been dark times for fans of Real Madrid and Chelsea, haven't they? I mean, your heart can only go out to both of them, and I hope Comic Relief are aware that Chelsea fans and Real Madrid fans are having a difficult time. But there's some good news for them coming up, Kieran, in 2025.
Yes, Chelsea and Real Madrid are guaranteed a place in the much looked forward to FIFA Club World Cup with 32 clubs in 2025.
Yeah.
Now,
this is an actual tournament. In case young people are confused, this is not an EA game coming up, is it? It's an actual tournament, isn't it?
It is an actual tournament. Yes, it's Real Madrid have just won the competition, and remember Chelsea were the previous holders. But historically, it's been in respect of around about 6 or 7 clubs. FIFA are looking to plug the gap in their own finances. FIFA make 75% of their money in any 4-year cycle from the FIFA World Cup itself. And we'll be coming to that shortly. And therefore, they are they're quite envious of UEFA, because UEFA makes a huge amount of money every single year because of the Champions League, the Europa League, and the Europa Conference. And once every 4 years, it makes money from the Euros. And then we also have the Nations League, which I think it's fair to say hasn't quite captivated the fan bases yet. It's the equivalent of the Confederations Cup. And anybody who can remind me who's won the Confederations Cup, I'll send them something nice. Not that I care.
If I was a lesson man, I'd be Googling that now, but I don't. I have the same level of care as you do. Spain. I'm going to go Spain. All right,
could be. But the new competition, it's going to have 32 clubs, and why are we interested in it on the price of football? It's because it looks like the participants are going to be guaranteed £25 million. I.e., the rich are going to get richer, which is something we don't always feel particularly comfortable about. So as far as the participation is concerned, there's going to be 12 clubs from UEFA, which will be the 4 Champions League winners over the 4-year cycle, plus 8 clubs based on their UEFA coefficient. So this is how well have you performed over the last 4 years, of which there will be a maximum of two clubs from any one country. So you could easily have 4 Premier League clubs, for example, in this competition. Let's say that Manchester City win the Champions League, or Liverpool or Manchester United. So we could have 2 or 3 clubs could win the Champions League in a 4-year cycle, and then potentially you can pick up 2 more from the UEFA coefficient. So that was going to be 12 from UEFA, and this will allow a greater participation, because historically it has been too much emphasis. It has been argued on European, South American clubs participating.
So, Kieran, the actual format of the tournament, is this going to take place a la World Cup over a period of a week, or are these games going to be spread out during the season in 2025?
Well, I think this is something which does need to be addressed. It would presumably have to be split, because to get 32 clubs down to a final, is it going to be a knockout? Is it going to be a group? Is a little bit unclear. I think what FIFA are also planning to do is the current international window. They're going to try to cram 4 games into the window as opposed to 2. By expanding the window slightly. So there's lots of pieces shuffling around. It does appear that FIFA and the clubs seem quite keen on this. As usual, nobody seems to have asked the players. And we have had the Winter World Cup, or sorry, Winter in Europe. I should have to get myself corrected with regards to that. And talking to people at clubs, they've said that there has been complications trying to reintegrate players into the tournament following a 4-week break, and it's less than ideal. So this could result in either some form of suspension of football, which I think will be unlikely, or it could mean that some clubs could effectively end up playing in not only the Champions League, but this competition as well, plus the Premier League, plus the FA Cup, and plus the Carabao Cup, which I think is a further indication that the Carabao Cup is not going to survive in its present form.
Thank you for putting it like that, Kieran. You've given people a couple of seasons to prepare themselves for the inevitable demise. I mean, you mentioned Winter in Europe. That's the problem with this tournament, is that there will inevitably be teams playing outside their normal league period, won't there? If you've got teams from 5 continents, 6 continents, whatever, I don't know how many there are these days. It seems to have changed. Watching Pointless the other day, again, what happens is FIFA come up with a way of making money and then try and cram the format into that afterwards. And speaking of war games, the next World Cup, I don't know about you, Kieran. I was perfectly happy with the number of games at the last World Cup, but I've got more to watch at the next World Cup.
You have indeed. There was an agreement that there would be 48 teams in the next FIFA World Cup for 2026, and part of me thinks actually that is quite good, because it does give the opportunity for those clubs that are not appearing on a regular basis to get there, and you've only got to see the reaction of fans from those countries, the likes of Ecuador and so on, that don't make a regular appearance. They have an absolutely fantastic time, and they shouldn't be denied that. So expanding the World Cup, I know there's a bit of sniffiness about it, but there is a potential positive as well, and nobody forces you to watch the matches. But what has happened, and again, part of me thinks this is good. Originally, the plan was to have 16 groups of 3.
16 groups, Kieran.
16 groups, yes. You and I can both remember when there were 16 teams in a World Cup, let alone 16 groups. But as has been pointed out, this means that you can't have matches taking place simultaneously. And part of the sheer joy of the World Cup that we've just seen in Qatar is those matches, which are the final matches, where things are changing by the minute. And that jeopardy, that tension, is part of the brilliance of football. Going into a scenario where you could have 2 clubs both knowing that a 0-0 draw will take them through to the knockout phase is full of jeopardy, and we're fully aware of
West Germany, Austria
accusations. Yes. So therefore, by switching to 12 groups of 4, that does mean we will be able to have the tension that brings. It also means that those countries, those players that have schlepped halfway across the world to attend the World Cup, they get more than 2 matches. Which does seem again. I've got an element of sympathy. So it looks like there's going to be 104 games in total, and this could mean up to 6 games in a single day, which means you're going to have three sets of kickoffs or more. And the thing that concerns me here, because I think we have to be consistent, there was a lot of concern about the World Cup in Qatar with regards to it can't take place during the summer due to the weather. Well, we've got the next World Cup taking place in Mexico, the United States, and Canada. Anybody that's ever been to some of the southern states of the US, anybody that's been to Mexico in June, you do not want to be running 12 or 13 kilometers at midday, 1 p.m. or 2 p.m. And this is my concern, is that there will not be the same level of scrutiny and concern for players' welfare. You and I both remember the World Cup in 1994, where Ireland got to knockout phase. It's not good for a Western European or Northern Western European complexion to be playing in those temperatures, because it's lack of familiarity. So, will there be the same level of fuss? I suspect not. Why is FIFA doing this? Well, this is the price of football. It's because the TV rights values will go up, and I'm sure the tournament on many levels will be a success. Will the players be given any consultation with regards to this? I think we both know the answer to that.
I hope that these rumours of the reversion to 14 groups are true. And if they are, I suspect it's because we saw in the last World Cup, Kieran, teams like Saudi Arabia are not the pushovers they would have been considered. There weren't many groups in the last World Cup where somebody was cut adrift. Most teams still had some element of being able to qualify after 1 game or 2 games, which we haven't seen for a long time. So I think, hopefully that's why FIFA changed. The 3-team group was a shocking idea all the way through. It was really ill thought through. West Brom fans, Kieran, are people we've spoken to on this pod on several occasions, both through messages and through interviews, and they continue their laudable and peaceful attempts to get a new club owner.
Yes, so there was they just had a fans match at the most recent game, and we've had Alistair on the show, and I think what he's doing is he and I are in regular contact. It has to be, for the sake of transparency. What he's doing is he's putting 24/7. It's become a real passion project, but it's non-violent, direct action, and that is the way to do it. To do it with humour, to do it with good grace, and that becomes more photogenic because it means the media will be able to report the action. So there was a fans march with regards to the dissatisfaction with owner Gauchon Lai, who borrowed. And we're recording this on the 15th of March. I think he actually borrowed the money on the 15th of March 2021. So it's now 2 years. He borrowed £4.95 million, which was due to be repaid along with £50,000 in interest. That's a remarkably low interest rate, by the way, for an 18-month loan. It was due to be paid on the 15th of September 2022. That deadline came and went. It was then due to be paid by the 31st of December 22 to allow the manager to invest in the transfer market in January. That deadline came and went, and we are now being told that it is early 2023 that the money will be repaid. Well, it's now 2 years, and it hasn't been. There's the issue of the other loan to Jeremy Peace, which I think was transferred to Gauchon Lai when he acquired the club. There's no evidence of that being repaid as well. So keeping the pressure up. I think there is now dialogue and liaison between the club, between Ron Gourlay, who's the chief exec, and some of the fans who are expressing their worry with regards to, is this money ever going to be repaid? And I think by taking the approach that they have done, which is to use a variety of methods, it is a way of creating embarrassment for the owner, and that is one way of keeping the pressure on and trying to encourage Gauchon Lai to do the best thing. And the best thing consists of two elements: A, repaying the loan, and B, selling the club to somebody who actually gives a damn about West Bromwich Albion.
Yeah, the problem there, and it's good that communication has been established between the fans and the chief exec, but we said that around about the 3rd of January, the last time we spoke about this, and the chief exec is not the owner, is it? And they say early 23. We're getting past the stage that it's early 23 already. So it's one that we need to keep an eye on, and it's one that it's a level of protest that Wigan fans might have to look at adopting. I don't know how many more times I can say this, Kieran, without it becoming really serious. But it seems to me the 5th or 6th time I've said this. Wigan Athletic have paid their wages late again.
Yes. And remember, we're all absolutely delighted that Wigan came out of administration. And it did appear that they have a Bahrain-based owner who was A, prepared to buy the club, and B, Wigan were promoted last season. So it was actually a lot of good news to come out of the club. But they lost £7 million in League One, by the way, as far as their finances are concerned. But we are now since June, we have now had 4 late payments of wages. And they started off with the ridiculous, and I think they're trying to become a little bit more sublime in their comments. First of all, they blamed the late payment of wages on the Queen's Jubilee, which I found somewhat strange myself, given that everybody knew when the Queen's Jubilee was going to take place. Everybody knew when the public holidays were going to take place. And also, I'm pretty certain that being able to transfer money internationally isn't actually determined by the Queen's Jubilee. So therefore, it does seem that seemed a bit incongruous. Secondly, it was blamed on foreign banks, Kevin, not just banks, but foreign banks.
Those foreign banks, the sort of foreign bank that dive in the penalty area and con the ref. Those sort of foreign banks. Yeah.
I can see Nigel Farage preening himself as soon as the mention of foreign banks takes place. So that was going. Well, I'm pretty certain. I might bank with Santander, or I might bank with HSBC, and they're foreign banks, and I've never actually found them to be too much of a problem. So that was a bit strange. And now 4 occasions in 10 months, and now they're actually saying it's liquidity issues. Now, liquidity issues means we don't have any cash. Okay, so let's which are promptly being resolved. Well, instead of promptly being resolved, them if you know that you're not going to have any cash and you've got a rich owner, the rich owner simply puts the money into the club bank account a few days before payday, and everything is resolved in that way. So it looks poor. I think there is again the potential here for action by the EFL because Wigan have effectively breached rules. What we don't want is scenarios of players taking the view that, we are elite athletes, we are in demand elsewhere, and potentially doing what we saw with Southend United a week or two ago, of the player saying, I'm going to put my personal circumstances first because I feel a sense of unease with the owners because they can't be trusted to pay me the wages on time, which is perfectly understandable. And anybody that works for any organisation, if I've not been paid 4 times in 10 months on time, I'd simply be looking for another job, and I suspect many other people will be doing exactly the same.
Well, this is the problem, Kieran, isn't it? I don't want to paraphrase Oscar Wilde because I don't want to be flippant about it, but to not pay the wages once could be considered misfortune, but to not pay it 4 times, Kieran, and the fact is that these people, so that's every 2 months, essentially. These people have to go to their bank and say, I'm sorry, I'm going to be struggling to pay my overdraft this month, or they're struggling to pay, energy bills are through the roof. People are worried enough as it is without thinking this could go on every 2 months. And we started the show by talking about the EFL getting tough, and rightly so, but 4 times, Kieran, and it seems that no one's stepping in to do anything about it. I can't. For me, it's the ultimate sin that you don't pay people who aren't paid that well in the first place. Not leave the players aside, but people around the club who aren't paid that well in the first place, most of whom are probably Wigan fans, not to be paid 4 times in 10 months, and with these pathetic excuses, it's just outrageous.
Yes, yeah. So, my concerns are with, as you rightly said, it's with the back office staff.
Of course.
Football clubs do not pay good wages. They rely on local people, often many of whom have an emotional attachment to the club, and they're not terribly paid, but they're certainly not market leaders. And to treat them in such a manner on a regular basis is fairly contemptuous of the club.
You mentioned Southend fans, Kieran, who probably have been in a good mood for the last couple of weeks after they managed to stay on the tightrope yet again. But it seems to me that somebody might be trading on their goodwill a little bit too much this week, Kieran.
Yes. Southend United have just announced their season card. Now, let's face it, Kieran, there's no such thing as a season card. It's a season ticket.
It always will be, yeah.
But they've announced their season card prices for next year. If you're an early bird, you can look forward to a 15% increase, and if you are a regular fan, a 29% increase on what you paid this season.
Is there an economic term for cheeky bastard? Is there a financial term that you can use that producer guy won't get upset about? Because really, I mean, that is. And then, carry on, Kieran. I despair sometimes.
Yes.
I really do.
And match day prices are going up too. And I like the sheer chutzpah that was involved here. Match day prices are going up because we want to ensure that they don't look too cheap compared to season ticket prices. Okay. I think there's a solution to this, guys. I think there's a solution to this.
Yeah.
So it's £340 for an early bird and £380 for a regular. And the club's saying, well, it works out as between 14 and 50 quid if you've got your early bird. But remember, we are talking about Southend United. You're asking people in March to put in a substantial amount of money to support a football club that has been subject to a series of winding up orders over the course of the last 12 months. A football club that has not published its accounts for the last 3 to 4 years because the owner chooses not to do so. Okay? There's no excuse. Ultimately, it's Ron Martin's choice not to do so. So the Shrimpers Trust, which is the fans' organisation, it said, well, we've had no consultation with the club. This has come completely out of the blue. We are going to be talking to our members to see what their response is. We've been told by Ron Martin that he's willing to have a meeting with us as the trust, but no fixed date. So that doesn't really help. And therefore, they've effectively said, yeah, we do not recommend buying the season ticket under those present set of circumstances. And if I just take one quote from the Shrimpers Forum, and it says, I'm pretty sure we charged around about that sum when we were pushing for the League One playoffs a few seasons back. Now, for the same price, you can watch an embargoed club put unpaid players on a pitch that's below par because the ground staff aren't paid, and the poor woman serving you a pint at half-time can just about afford the bus ride home, as she hasn't been paid for 2 months. Oh, and you can urinate in the dark because the toilet lights don't work. Find pigeon crap 10 metres from the food kiosk Tuesday last week in the East Blues Yellows, and half the away end is condemned. Now, under those circumstances, would you hand across £380?
You would think somebody who's put his fans through an existential crisis the way he has recently, and we discussed this, Kieran, and I don't care if we do sound dramatic, there would have been Southend fans not sleeping the night before the potential winding up order, many hundreds of them. To put them through that and then to have the sheer gall, as you say, to do this, and I've seen what the Southend fans are doing, and I think their response is magnificent. And I would, I think we should try and get one of them on, because we need to get more detail in this story, and we need to get. It occurs to me that we've kind of looked at it from Ron Martin's angle for too long, and we need to talk to a Southend fan. Kieran, if I was, let's face it, I'm a tubby little middle-aged fella now from just outside Croydon. But if I was a Brazilian professional footballer plying my trade in the Premier League, I think I'd probably be quite a happy young man. But there's one this week that definitely isn't.
Absolutely. So step forward, Gustavo Scarpa, who is a player with Nottingham Forest. And he's a Brazilian player. He played all of his career in his home country before coming to Forest. But he's put around about £1 million of his earnings and savings into an organisation called WLJC, which will come as a great surprise, is a cryptocurrency organisation. It promised high returns. Now, I'm from a finance background, and I always say to people, I'm not a financial advisor, but I always say to people, if it looks too good to be true, avoid, because there's nobody that can ultimately promise that they can outperform the market. So I think they were promised high returns. They were promised 3 to 5% a month. If you annualize that, you're talking about a 40% return. So I would have been very skeptical. It looks as if his money has disappeared. He's tried now to get some form of legal redress, but it also sadly appears that he's not alone, and that there's been some other Brazilian players from the likes of Fluminense and Palmeiras who have equally fallen for this. And when people have a go back, and to which they're perfectly entitled, and all viewpoints are welcome. When people have a go back, when I express my skepticism with regards to some of these organisations, we are dealing with people who are professional athletes. They don't have an experience of what is good or bad in terms of financial integrity, and therefore, as Mike Tyson always used to say, they've got a friend for every dollar, and there are too many fly-by-night organisations who are simply there to try to take advantage of these young men, and it's depressing, and sadly it will continue because the regulatory authorities. It's difficult for them because they end up playing whack-a-mole. These are not financially regulated organisations, and as I've said on many occasions, I have no problem with the fundamental principle of cryptocurrency, but I would always be very, very cautious about putting any money into something which is unregulated, highly volatile, and open to manipulation.
Let me come back to that, Kieran. But first of all, let me apologise. The latest sound you can hear is the spin cycle of the washing machine, which is actually my fault because I realised that Ali and her sister were coming back today, and I panicked and put a load of washing in, forgetting that we had the pod to do. The thing with the cryptocurrency, and I'm not trivialising at all the fact that this young man has lost £1 million. It's a lot of money for anybody, and also his family will suffer from that as well, and some of his friends who won't be getting the money that they thought they might be getting. But my issue with crypto is that he could probably, let's say, afford to lose it. The fact is that the same cryptocurrency would have been luring, for want of a better word, people who can't afford to lose money into it as well. There would have been other people who earn a lot less than Gustavo Scarpa losing money in this, and that's my issue. Is that these companies glamorize it, lure you in, and say, look, these players are buying it. Why don't you buy it? And it's, as you've always said, one of the things that's wrong with the education system in this country is that we don't get taught financial acumen from an early age. You know, I'm an intelligent chap in general. When it comes to money, I get bewildered. So there's a lot of people out there like me who are easily lured into these things, and that's my issue with cryptocurrency. The next story, Kieran, I assumed when I've cast my eye over it, it was about Stockport FC, but it's not, is it?
No, this is, and I appreciate one of our listeners put me in contact with this, or drew my attention to it. This is something called Stocks FC. It looks as if somebody has taken Football Index, the stock market for football, and Tipexed out the words Football Index and replaced it with Stocks FC. It describes itself as the football stock market. And remember, one of the things that I think Football Index claimed was that by having the word stock and market as separate words, it meant that it wasn't a stock market. So let's take a look at some of the marketing for Stocks FC. Gives you the chance to assemble players, to watch your wealth grow, to buy out-of-form players and sell later for a higher price, and to invest in young wonder kids. Yeah, exactly. And it's run by blockchain. If you do take a look at the small print on the website, it does have a disclaimer right at the very end. The Stocks FC white paper does not constitute any legal, financial, business, investment, or tax advice. So why is it telling us to watch your wealth grow? And it says you can consult your own professional advisors. Okay, I'm not a professional financial advisor. If you think you're going to make money out of this, I would use one word, and that word is avoid.
Because again, Kieran, consult your professional advisor. Most of the people these adverts are trying to lure in haven't got professional advisors. They haven't got the access to professional advisors. I've got access to you, and I'm still mucking things up. But they haven't. Not that I would get involved in anything remotely like this, but they haven't got professional advisors. They look at it and they go, "Oh, this is a bit of fun. This is a bit like fantasy football, but with a bit of money I could make," and it's just not right.
Yeah, and if it's marketed as fantasy football online, then great, fill your boots. But when this type of wording appears, and what you will then have, you will have the bots or the crypto bros going onto social media and saying, "Get in early, because once this becomes big, everybody will be trying to buy your players from you, and this is how you make all your money." And it's we're not saying it's a scam, just about. But it's something which makes me feel is the classic utilisation of celebrity to normalise what is a very, very high risk, if you're going to look at it from a financial angle, from very, very high risk activity.
Yeah, I'm coming across as a bit mardy today. Now I'm having to go a lot of people. That will teach me to see how far into the week I can get without drinking. And I almost, Kieran, and looking through sober eyes, this next story, I had to rub my sober eyes for a couple of seconds because I'm fairly certain it has the word good news and Bury in the same sentence.
I think this is good news. We did express our personal disappointment that the amalgamation of the two elements of the Bury fan base in AFC and the Supporters Society had fallen through because the 2/3 majority, which was required by both organisations, wasn't achieved. And there was also elements of glee expressed by those members of the Supporters Society who had voted against the coming together. However, progress has been made, and the people who have been working behind the scenes at the FA and other organisations who I won't mention, but they know who they are, and you have my utmost doffing of cap here, have managed to get I think the people in charge of the Supporters Society to reconsider. And the reason for this, and if you go on to the Supporters Society website, it is quite blunt. Under the present scenario, there won't be a football team playing football at Gig Lane. There's a potential to lose an awful lot of money, which has been promised by the local council, from the Department of Levelling Up, and so on. And therefore, the last time there was a vote, the executive of the Supporters Society, and I do feel that they abrogated their responsibilities here. They said, we are not going to advise you to vote one way or the other. And it turns out, I think it was around about 62% of people voted in favour, but you needed a 2/3 majority. What they have now said is that they are going to recommend a vote, and any members of the executive of the Bury Football Club Supporters Society who do not want to recommend a vote, I think they're going to be persuaded to resign. So there is now a chance of an amalgamation between the two organisations, and which effectively was a football club called AFC Bury, which was not playing at Gig Lane, and people who owned Gig Lane who didn't have a football club. It's the opportunity to come together. And if Martin McGuinness and Ian Paisley can do it in Northern Ireland, then sometimes other people can do it as well. What you will find is, yes, there are differences, and there are always differences. There's differences in all fan bases, but surely what is greater is a shared love of Bury Football Club. And if you can't set aside those differences, then really you shouldn't be part of the whatever is going to be coming forwards. So I think this is potential fantastic news. I'll be delighted if there is a club wearing what I consider to be the traditional Bury colours, and I'm sure we'll be using the traditional Bury colours, is able to play football. They will have a decent fan base, and this will help them to accelerate their way through the different divisions, ideally with a return to the EFL in due course, purely on merit, and that would be fantastic news.
It would be, Kieran, because these are people, I know they've fallen out, some of them, and we know from our social media that there are different points of view, but they're not just united by a love of football at Bury. I imagine they're united by a love of the town of Bury as well, Kieran, and a football club playing back at Gig Lane can only be good for the town of Bury economically, morally, and in terms of their civic pride, can't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it will give me an excuse to go back to Gig Lane and get some of the fantastic black pudding that you can buy from the the market there as well, which as somebody that lived in Manchester for 40 years and always used to try to find an excuse to get some, will be excellent.
Just black pudding with honey and quinoa, or just normal working class?
Organic, absolutely, yes.
We haven't been to Newcastle, Kieran, for a while, and our final story brings us to St James's Park. And it's one of those stories that, for people like me who have no notion of how business works, is one that's entirely baffling.
Yes. Last week, Newcastle United Football Club Limited issued one share to owners. Now, football clubs issuing shares to owners is quite common, and there's around about 12 million shares in issue. What was slightly different here is that the shares got a face value of 5p, but it was issued to a shareholder for £57 million. And you go, what? At the same time, we had this week, Cambridge United had issued 20 million, I think it was 20 million shares for 5p each, at 5p each to raise £1 million, which got Max Rushton very excited, as you can imagine. Yes. So people say, well, why is this? And there must be some logic behind this. And the rationale that we have here is Newcastle United is owned 80% by the Saudi Arabian Public Investment Fund, 10% by the Reuben Brothers, and 10% by Amanda Staveley. And that's the way that they want to go forwards. The problem is that if you issue a lot of shares to all of the shareholders, it could mean that it could put financial challenges on some of them more than others. If you just issue one share, you've still got 12 million shares in issue. And the thing about shares is that they're a bit like baked beans in a can. They're just identical as far as everybody's concerned. And when you're looking at baked beans on toast, do you actually care which baked bean you have? There's no preference. They're seen as being homogenous, and this is the case with shares. So one of the Newcastle United shareholders has paid £57 million. This has given the club additional cash. I know some Newcastle fans are saying, well, £57 million, that's the equivalent of a James Maddison, and putting two and two together. I don't think that is the case, however. Newcastle United did spend quite a lot of money in the January 22 transfer market, and we're about to have a knock on the door, and the dog's about to go. Hold on. That's a wonky chomp turd. Okay. I could see the postman wandering up sort of the rest of the road. He's getting closer and closer. Are we going to finish the show beforehand?
Is he a new postman? Because from what I can gather, postmen in your road don't wander. They tend to rush in and rush out quickly, like something from the 1970s comic. Kieran, elaborate for me on that. And I was going to say, lesser pods would edit Finley barking out, but we're above that sort of chicanery. We won't do that. We won't tamper with the truth like other pods do. So this is is this standard business practice, Kieran?
It is in the sense, because beforehand, each share the reason why it's called a share is because it gives you a share of the football club. Each share gave you 1/12 millionth of Newcastle United, and now following the issue of this one share, somebody has got 1/12 million and 1/1 of Newcastle United. So it is a way for an individual shareholder to put a lot of money into the club without having to create a financial burden for the other shareholders. So I think it's a smart piece of planning by the people involved. It gets cash into Newcastle. It will enable them to pay the payrolls for March and April and so on. They will have had to go and pay some substantial amounts out of the club in January 23 in respect of the players that they bought 12 months ago, because as we know these days that transfers are very much on a basis of paying in instalments. So it's good for cash. It's good for preserving the balance between shareholders, and I don't really see a downside. Although, again, in the court of public opinion that is social media, there are, of course, immediate allegations of breaches of financial fair play, sports washing, and so on, which, in my view, none of which hold water.
I'm sorry to come back to this, Kieran, but I'm fascinated by it, just in the way it works. So Cambridge, as we saw, and we loved Max Rushton on this show, and he was very excited. So Cambridge issued all these shares, and the financial director says, so there's 2 million, was it? Cambridge?
2 million,
2 million.
Yeah.
And I think, well, do you know what? I like Cambridge. I like Max. I'll offer to buy 100 of these. And so I get those 100 shares. But for Newcastle United, the financial director, does he go, right, we're going to issue one new share, and he says to a particular person, we want you to buy it? Or does it's just one new share and then they hope somebody buys it? I'm just slightly baffled as to how the face value of 5p becomes 57 million. Is that because several people wanted to buy it and there was an auction, or because they identified a person to buy that share and they asked them to buy it for 57 million?
Right. I suspect what's happened here is the club has said, right, we need to improve our cash position. We could do with a substantial investment. And then there are effectively 3 shareholders in the shape of PIF, Reuben Brothers, and Amanda Staveley. PIF have got more money than the rest of the planet put together. So they say, yeah, we're willing to put the money in. But what we don't want to do is that if we were to issue 57 million shares times 5 pence, or 57 times 5, that's what 335 million shares. That would mean that we would end up with 95, 96% of Newcastle. So what we will do instead is that we will simply agree to buy one share for 57 million. We don't want to put the money in the form of loans because A, we don't want to burden the club with debt. And also, for anybody broadly familiar with Islamic finance, the concept of lending money and charging interest is inconsistent. So it's quite a neat solution. Normally, when a club issues shares, it issues them, or it offers them, in the proportion to which the current split of the company is concerned. So let's say that you, I, and producer Guy, we owned Price of Football Productions Limited, and producer Guy had 50%, and you and I had 25%. And then producer Guy comes along and says, "Right, we need to put another £1,000 into the company. What we'll do is that he'll put in 50% and he'll get 50% of the shares. You and I put in 25%. So he put in 500, we put in 250 each. And that way we preserve our percentage ownership of the company." What Newcastle have done is, because there's already 12 million shares in issue, if you issue one more share, it doesn't actually increase the proportion of Newcastle United that you own, but it does mean that the club has ended up with more cash.
Right. Producer Guy's not going to do that, is he?
No.
All right, good. So I'm a bit short this week. That's good news. In fact, I'm willing to offer 10 shares in Kevin Day PLC at 5 pence each. I will accept anything up to 10,000. Thank you to everyone who's donated to the pod via our Patreon page. If you'd like to make a small monthly contribution to the pod, then please go to patreon.com/priceoffootball. And if you have a question you'd like answered on the show, email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. And in the meantime, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell.
Well, thank you as always for also for some of you that have actually given me the stories. It is great that you contact us across a variety of methods, and also the nice things that you do say about the show. You know, we do try our best to be as even-handed and as objective in our comments. There's a variety of ways in which you can support the show, and thank you to everybody from Patreon. It does make a difference. So we'll be honest there. But another way is to go on to your app from which you download your podcasts and to give us a review. We're not quite sure how the algorithms work, but producer guy says it helps us in the charts. It helps us to book guests. And the Mark Ives interview is cocky. He's very, very professional, and looks to me like a very safe pair of hands there as well. It doesn't matter what you say as far as the app is concerned. You can even say you would rather have it presented by Wilfred Zaha and Lewis Dunk to continue the representation of the rivalry, and it wouldn't make a blind difference to us.
I don't, is Lewis Dunk a good talker? Because I think Wilf would have to be the straight man in that relationship. That'd be great. Imagine that, asking them to do a pod Thursday morning after what happens tonight.
Yes.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The price of football. The price of football.